Hey, I wondered how you were doing that. And it was a recording. Good evening, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much, Barry and the Ancient Mariner, for being knocking on the door just as we're starting. We've got to take care of something.
Is it time yet? Are you coming out to play?
We are here to play, at least for the next half hour. Mrs. M, there's your tonic water.
Thank you very much.
To add to the exquisite gin and tonic I've crafted for you. Why are you laughing? I already have crafted you an exquisite gin and tonic.
It looks great.
Yes.
We've been very, very poorly, which is why we haven't been...
Very, a bit. Not
wow. Quite. No, we were hacking it up, weren't we? Like coughing like
but just
crazy.
Just a seasonal disorder. Nothing too serious compared to what a lot of people have to put up with. Yeah. But it's great to be here for the next half hour or so. Cheers. Cheers. Hold on. Enough gin in that for you? You nearly drank it neat, didn't you, just now?
I did have a sip.
Cheers, everybody. Nice. Welcome to the Barefoot broadcast. What's your poison tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great.
Marvelous. Okay, so we're talking about a big we tonight, aren't we?
Yes, a big we.
Could you give us the astrological backdrop set up for this? Because it is, for me, what inspired talking tonight. And somebody said in our community, we're going to hell in a handcart. So I want to examine that as well, because I think that's all part of the big we. I want to look at what is hell and what is the handcart, if that is true. And I think he's got a point, or she, depending on who said it. But give us an astro setup, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Pluto, which is an outer planet, also NASA says it's a dwarf planet. But anyway,
Pluto, do they know?
Yeah, right. Pluto. Basically, as Pluto changes signs, it creates a whole new kind of generation, and it looks at power and how power is demonstrated, expected, and it also shows us where we're getting challenged ourselves. So like we see generational challenges and also personal ones. Now, Pluto changed signs on the 23rd. And it's gone into the sign of Aquarius. And so I've been sort of considering what's going on with that. And in the last few years, we've had Saturn going through Aquarius. Now, Saturn is basically Pluto's bitch. You know, Saturn is essentially kind of getting the party started for Pluto's arrival. They're both the kind of like badasses of the zodiac, you know, like Saturn is like the CEO, and then Pluto is like the organization that owns the company, if you know what I mean. So he's like Darth Vader to Saturn's stormtroopers. Okay. So anyway, they got into the sign of Aquarius, which is absolutely well known for socialism and liberalism, also communism.
Social ideas.
Yes, social ideas. And, you know, like Aquarius is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus. And Saturn on one side is very much about rules, regulations, and matrices, and having everyone very, very level. And then Uranus is all about freedom and independence. And so we've got this real kind of, there's always a flip side to everything, I notice. And, you know, like we've seen in the last few years, this narrative of very strong virtue signaling messages. There's also been a very strong narrative that I've noticed and observed. I'm pretty sure everyone watching will attest to that as well. You know, that there is only one way to believe right now, because if you say something that goes against some kind of community, some communal government, shared government line on what you say about gender, what you say about the right to life, about what you say about
anything
pretty much. Right. And if you say anything that goes against this narrative, you get like shut down with fact checks and things like that. And actually they don't really stand up, because like when you investigate them, you find out the fact checkers are owned by different people. Or when you say something and they say, that's not science, and then you look at the scientific papers it was based on, you realize everything leads back to the money. And you know,
oh my God, are we going to get shut down any minute?
Yes, now? No, but that's how it feels, Barry. Like Barry just said, debate is far right. And yeah, I mean, I stand for being in the question and being in the conversation. And so what I've noticed, as Saturn went into the sign of Aquarius, all of a sudden the conversation stopped happening. It was like the social ideas of this, and this is what we're sticking to. And anyone that questions is obviously a bigot, and is obviously far right, and is obviously, up to no good. Now, I don't consider myself to be far right, but by people judging me, I probably would be. But actually, I find myself very much in the middle.
People would bring out the far right in you.
No, but people that say, "Oh my goodness, she's actually considering that, what has been said in the media might not be true."
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
And so Pluto coming into Aquarius has had lots of astrologers going, "Ooh, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what's happening." Because Pluto's going to be there for another 20 years, up until 2043. And he's going to get his big balls out onto the table, and he's going to want to start to really show his power, because that's what Pluto does.
Right.
And at the same time, AI is also coming, coming into its own, I guess.
New bogeyman.
Yeah, and if you can't actually tell what's real and what's not real, and if there's already a precedent being set that humans are almost being upgraded, like, for instance, there's so much talk about adapting DNA right now. So, gone are the days when all the vaccines that were given out to people were like old style ones. Now there's talk.
Those old style ones are positively homeopathic, weren't they?
By comparison to what they're like now. And I think the plan is to make all vaccines based on mRNA technology, which changes DNA, which changes what it is to be human at some level. You're messing around with the code. Like if you mess around with a code on a computer, it's actually upgraded. It's not considered the same thing. Its operating system changes.
You could say that it's still a computer.
Yes. Okay. So it's like you're still a biological being with a different code. And so some of the questions that I've come up in considering what Pluto in Aquarius might bring, because I'm trying to do a forecast for the next 20 years. I'd love to time capsule the video that I've just recorded with my thoughts, because, when I was looking at them, I think at some point there's going to be, where AI is mimicking humans and human responses so well, and actually outdoing humans in terms of AI images and AI, it can write a report in a matter of seconds in a way that a human couldn't. I actually think at some point AI will end up having a right to life. I know that sounds utterly bonkers.
Has that not already happened?
I don't think it's going to be long before AI gets to say what happens to humanity. Like AI might actually have a supremacy over humanity. I think these are kind of interesting times.
I feel out of the loop here.
Oh, well, this is what I think we might be stepping towards.
And can you bring it around to the big we?
Yeah, well, what occurs to me, I titled my video "The Death of the Individual," because it feels like in this last few years, anything that's individual that wants to think for itself, it's almost being shut down, suppressed, smothered. And as Pluto goes into Aquarius and more legislation is arrives, in Canada, for instance, there's new legislation now pushing parents out of parental relationships with their children.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if a child goes to the doctors and said, I'm really depressed, I actually want to be euthanized, there's rules now to allow a doctor to go ahead and do that without even letting the parent know. And in the same way, like children that have decided they're in the wrong body, they're in the wrong gender, they can go ahead and start gender reassignment without any parental decisions or consent, without even any conversation. In fact, there was a dad that was locked up. There was a dad in Canada was locked up because he complained he wanted to be part of a conversation about what happened to his daughter, who wanted to transition to be a man, and this daughter was prepubescent, and his ex-wife was like, this is what's happening. Social services got involved, and sorry.
Are we going to observe the dong?
Yeah, we should. Let's observe the dong. Whew.
Right, this is. Feel free to take part in this as well. The Zen dong is sounded to remind us to get back in our bodies.
I feel good. I'm back in my body.
I was getting quite triggered by what you were saying. So
Sorry, I was going at it with some pace.
getting a bit ranty.
This is just what I've been observing over, like
May
what.
I
Can I just
of course.
just add one more bit? One of the things that I've noticed over the last few years in silencing one side of every conversation, from how it appears to me, or demonizing one side, it automatically makes the other side look like the complete polar opposite. In actual fact, when we get into conversations, what we normally find is that most of us find this place in the middle when we talk. Because like if you were to say, what's your biggest fear about people deciding for themselves how they manage their health? Or what's your biggest fear about parents actually getting involved in a conversation with their children? What's your biggest fear about people wanting to educate their own children? And like when people start talking, they come together and they realize that there's some common ground. But at the moment, I don't see the common ground is being encouraged. In fact, it's almost being shut down, just as there are bigger plans for world governments to join hands. And also, things like 15-minute cities, which has all been explained away on the back of climate information. And yet there's lots and lots of scientists out there for decades have been saying, we don't agree with this information. And they all get discredited and shut down. And so we're living in an age where it appears that there's no longer any intelligent debate. And so, yeah, I seeing how things are not being debated anymore, and how the media seems to be in the same hands as the governments and the police forces, and that there's obviously something right at the top, dictating it. I don't know, like, where can you live where you can actually be free to make responsible decisions yourself without having something come in and do it for you?
Portugal?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's the whole idea of social contracts. There are lots of arguments to say social contracts are good.
Well, they are, aren't they? I'm not sure what you're suggesting.
Well, I think.
Could I just say before I forget, intelligent debate is an oxymoron.
Conversation.
It can't. I don't think it can ever be. Debate is not a it's not a factor, or intelligence is not a factor of debate. Anyway, the Algarve is where you can do all of that, apparently, says Paul, and Sue's human rights, women's rights, sexual orientation rights, spiritual rights. The right in many cases are against these rights. It's quite a pickle tonight, isn't it? The people that pay the media also pay the scientists. Is there a connection? Yeah, I would say so. I don't. Yeah. It's nothing new, is it, to have to buy the media? It may well be that it's more concentrated and intense now, but I don't think any of these things that you're talking about are new, personally.
No, you're right. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is when you start asking the question, like, why aren't parents allowed to be in the conversation about if their child wants to go through a transition?
Hold on a minute.
Hang on one sec. When you ask that question, the assumption is made that you're anti-trans, that you're a bigot, you're this, you're that. I mean, actually, the reality, the funny thing is, Barry, who's in the audience, who's my cousin, I remember going around to his house when I was about 16, and we were sat there, and he said, "Oh, I've got a friend coming over," and his friend arrived and went straight upstairs, and he said, "Oh, don't go upstairs. You'll understand what's going on in a couple of hours." And then this woman came down the stairs a couple of hours later, and
Barry's like, "Oh my God, I remember that."
And Barry had a friend who had been talking, and Barry might want to fill in some details if you can remember, because I think you've probably got quite a colourful life as well. His friend was part of a transition program, I think, had wanted to become a woman, and I think had been speaking to the NHS, and the NHS had said, well, you need to live as a woman and you need to commit to it, and we're not going to do any kind of gender reassignment surgery. You have to absolutely show that it's what you want. And they gave him a really long lead time so he could change his mind. And like, he did these long cycles, and he came and he got himself all dressed up, and my mate from the army. Thank you, Barry. Yeah. And I remember that weekend we also went to like a Rocky Horror party, and you were all in a basque and with your beard and everything, and we had loads of fun. And
Strong look.
he pulled it off really well. But it doesn't matter how accepting you are, if we're living, I think, in very dangerous times. If you ask a question, people assume that you're anti something rather than just trying to explore and find out what's really going on.
Who has said that to you? This is what I find interesting.
Top scientist who reported to government during COVID in the US.
Yeah.
Top scientist to Yale University. I had a really long conversation with him and asked him lots and lots of questions.
Yeah.
It was quite early on, and I said to him, given that you're part of the research team that was recommending courses of action in terms of vaccination, and he was like, yes. And you were there, you saw you heard the conversation.
And you had the conversation.
And
right?
I had a conversation with him, and I said, there's quite a lot of sudden heart attacks going on right now.
Yeah.
And he also was a doctor who specialized in heart health. And so I asked him, I said, what's going on about that? That must be quite concerning that this is happening at the same time as this rollout. What's going on in terms of Yale University? And at one point he said, are you one of those crazy QAnons? And that was his response, rather than...
Yeah, but he didn't say, I'm not talking to you anymore, did he? Or like,
no.
Or
but there were a couple of... we kept it all really civil.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of times when rather than answer a question, say, actually, it's a really intelligent question. You're right. I'm a heart specialist. And I was also recommending the appropriate treatment for COVID. You're right. There is an increase in heart trauma at the moment. And here's what we're doing. But rather than answering that question in a really intelligent conversation, and I don't think it was necessarily because this person's a bad person at all. He's obviously a really great person and was doing what he thinks is right. But when the media is selling all of these little streams of what you say in this situation, people who are saying he's a crazy bigot and you must be QAnon if you say this, and all of these.
I'm sure it's designed that way.
It's gaslighting.
Yeah,
to shut people up.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist. But I think what occurs to me about this is the depiction of the problem is far worse than the actual problem itself, and that of course is what the media does.
Yeah.
And because I never meet people who tell me what to say or think.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I don't have people telling me how to live my life. I have occasional skirmishes with silly police fines on the roadside or other forms of government extortion like taxation and stuff like that. But everyone else, there's nothing new or unusual about that. And I really, for me, I see people becoming quite ensnared by the idea of it rather than the reality of it. And you could argue that is a mission accomplished if that's the case.
Yes.
And I think, I'm not sure if you do want to extend the plutonium, astrological plutonium to this idea of the big we. As I understood it, part of the transition at the moment is moving away from what I think. And that's whether you're strongly asserting your left or right-wing views, as it turns out, into a more collective sense of movement and development for society. I can see that makes that in my heart makes a lot of sense, that we are changing. Ooh, Now you find out if you're attached to what you were saying or not when the dong comes in, don't you?
And then you forget what you were shouting about.
Well, yes, I have, which is great, isn't it? But yeah, no, I do remember now. I think we are this idea of going to hell in a handcart. I think there is all of what you've said. I think is part of this dynamic, energetic shift that's going on at the moment. That informs the political, sociological, ideological landscape, and it's part of something that's going on, which seems to me it will be very difficult for anyone now in our world, and I mean the people who share an existence in the dominant narrative of what was called Western civilization, what's still called Western civilization, what might be called the change of that into something else now. And we appear to be, when it's dusk and night is falling, it seems to take quite a while, doesn't it, as the sun's setting, and then it suddenly goes very dark.
Yeah.
In transformational terms, it seems to me like we're in that moment close to where things could suddenly feel like they're suddenly happening.
Yeah.
I resent and refute the ideas of societal collapse and global breakdown, because I think the globe and society is too big to experience these huge events, notwithstanding, some parts could be horribly devastated. But generally speaking, a bit like in what I've said about the Second World War, many parts of the world carried on untouched.
Yeah.
And as a child brought up with the history of the Second World War, you would have thought, you'd have taken it literally that it was a world war, and it wasn't. It was a mostly war, perhaps at worst, and a lot of people's lives went on normally. And I think we're up against something quite similar, where there are going to be drastic and momentous changes, but they will be sequenced, and they won't. I'm not meaning to say they won't be difficult, but I think they will be sequenced, and they won't happen in quite the way we expect. And I think all of these you've said is part of that. And I welcome. Well, it doesn't matter if I welcome it or not. I think it's happening, and I don't welcome it. I look forward to what's possible thereafter.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing now, is that we don't get too freaked out by being told what to think about things, or being cancelled or anything like that. But we come up with the new ideas of the future, because the ideas that a lot of us might rail against now are the ideas of the past, and they're the swan song of the times, and the noise is getting shriller and more unpleasant, and we could do well to take refuge from it, and instead of engaging in I won't be told by woke people to shut up, is like, well, actually I never meet any woke people, or I don't actually experience a lot of what the pundits of doom are saying is going on in the world. I don't experience that, and I want to put my time into creating what's coming, rather than arguing about what's left, if that makes sense.
Well, going back to astrology, one of the things that I noticed with Pluto is it's a bit like quicksand. Like in quicksand, the more you fight against it, the more you get sucked in.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like life or death. Like it gets really, really quite bad.
Yeah.
But if you stay calm, you breathe through it, you wiggle your feet, get your feet free, and then slowly lean back and kind of float on top of all the bullshit.
Which would take tremendous presence of mind. It's a very good analogy, isn't it?
Yeah. If Pluto goes over like a really important part of your chart, it almost doesn't matter what willful thing you do to try and control your life.
Yeah.
It's like there's this extra force like punching you back down. And the only way to get through a Pluto transit, from what I've seen with my clients and from my own experience, is just to go with it and say, whatever. It's like
and float to the top.
Yeah, it's like death of the ego. It's like there's a part of you that is trying to control something.
Yeah.
We all think we're in control, and that we should have control of our lives.
Yeah, and that our expectations should be met.
And in actual fact, the only thing that we have any control over is how we are in ourselves.
Yeah.
And that comes with presence of mind. And so one of the things that I noticed, I think things have to get quite dark and gloomy usually before people even realize that they maybe don't have control. They're in a situation that they don't feel in control with, and for any real change to come about. And I do also recognize that the sign of Aquarius also is quite radical at times, and really insightful, inventive. And so I think it's also going to lead to a lot of outbreaks of similar themes, like lots of people working together, and possibly, aside from Klaus Schwab saying, you'll own nothing but be happy, you might have lots of people working on similar based projects out of their own volition, because they feel it really, really strongly, and they get together and they start working in their own communities.
Well, it's a bit like France at the moment, isn't it? I mean, I think it's idiotic that people are setting their town halls on fire because they're being made to retire 2 years early.
I need to share something with you.
Now, I understand why they're angry. And yes, in conversation with somebody, 10 years of the Gilets Jaunes movement.
Yeah.
And it's done nothing, is it, except to stoke that French sense of righteousness, depending on which side of the political divide you're on. And I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, if they're going to do it anyway, aren't they? It's nothing to do with me. It's outside of my realm. I'm fascinated by it for sure, but I don't see how it's a contribution to the kind of the life we want to live. Certainly not. It's certainly not. I don't want to be setting my town hall on fire as an act of begging to my government to not make me work 2 years longer. I mean, there's an irony there, isn't there? It's like, we were quite happy with the yoke of work. Thank you very much.
Up until 62,
and
but
now
not 64.
We draw the line at 64. So we're going to set stuff on fire. I mean, it just seems idiotic, and certainly not in any way constructive, creative, or useful for what I think is in the pipeline. But carry on, vive la France.
A couple more things I want to share just on the theme of Pluto and Aquarius and whatnot. Last time Pluto went into Aquarius was in the late 1700s, like 1777. Now, what was happening back then? Oh,
I wasn't there. How dare you?
The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, and also the invention of the smallpox vaccine.
Bloody murder.
And so, isn't it funny that as Pluto's going into Aquarius again, there's this whole new branch of medicine. There's France looking like it's going back into a revolution. America looking more like separated than it has done in a really, really long time, or at least that's how the media is portraying it. And it looks like we're going through a bit of an industrial revolution. Obviously not in the same way, but we're going through like a restructuring,
isn't it meant
AI
to be the
restructuring.
third, fourth, or 27th industrial revolution?
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. But there's two more thoughts I'd really like to just quickly put on the table. First
like
one,
Pluto and his big balls.
Yeah, Charles Eisenstein wrote this great little piece called "The Robot That Wanted to Become a Man." It's well worth reading, but it was talking about how this robot, suddenly had this urge to become absolutely human. And actually, I'll read it because I don't want to spoil it for you. But our friend Dr. Dane here, or he's not our friend yet, but he will be at some point.
Nice way
he talks about chaos versus control. And what he has recognized in his work, and I've been playing around with these ideas, is that we put all these safety measures in place to keep us safe. And actually, when we have all these control measures in place, we become more robotic. We have less opportunity to do different things, and like a smaller bandwidth to think
Sounds like
about
the
things.
Industrial Revolution, funnily enough.
Yeah, but what he says is, in all disease, and like he's an osteopath and blah blah blah, but he's looking at disease patterns in people. And thinking patterns as well. And what he notices is in most diseases, it comes from controlled thinking and not having enough flexibility. So you start funneling all your energies, your psychic energies, your physical energies into this one way of being. And that's what causes the dis-ease in bodies. And he says the most remarkable thing about healing is you put a tiny bit of chaos into that thought pattern. You put in just a question that opens things up to possibility. All of a sudden, a body starts to react. That we need chaos, we need freedom, we need these little things to break us free. Because when we're not breaking free, we're actually like, look in nature. You know, let's, aside from these top speakers, let's look in nature. I love gardening. I'm pretty sure most people here probably do too. Like, you plant something, it grows, and all the time it's in its growth phase. It's flexible, it's supple, it has some movement, it has liquid in it, you know. The moment something has grown big enough and it's about to die off, it starts to get brittle, it starts to dry out, it starts to desiccate, and then, you know, it sheds all its seeds everywhere. But the moment we stop growing, the moment we stop flexing and adapting, that's when we start to sicken. And so,
well said.
Yes, that's where I really wanted to end it. I'm just really keen to find out what everyone else thinks.
I'm afraid it's too late for that. It is 31 minutes past the hour. You've had your time. And
Yeah,
you're
I've
not
really
missing.
had a right old go. I mean,
think-
if you're interested in this from an astrological perspective, go to Feel Good Astrology channel and check out my latest.
Your opus on the
Yeah,
matter.
yeah.
Well, thank you for being here and your contributions. Great comparison there, says Sarah. Thank you for being
Can we
with us.
just go to a couple of, I know we said it's going to be half an hour, but.
Okay, Rocky Horror. Don't dream it, be it.
Mm,
Very prescient and appropriate, definitely.
yeah, thanks, Suze.
And I mean, we didn't really talk about the big we, as it turns out.
Oh, but I mean, that is the big we, like, you know.
I've waited long enough. Who doesn't like a big we after waiting forever? And I have been waiting a long time to see a different kind of way of life for our species in our culture. And I think it's in the post. I really do. I think you know, whether you can relate to it from the banking point of view, the cost of living crisis, political unrest. There are quite a few markers now for transition from a system that clearly doesn't work, and its cycles are getting smaller and smaller and more. That dynamic you mentioned of chaos and control is being played out, isn't it, in politics and societies? Something is going to happen. And or something is happening, and I think we need to create it. Otherwise, it will be thrust upon us, as I've said before. And no one likes having it thrust upon them. Owen's here. Good evening to you as well.
Hey, Owen.
You lovely. Oxymoron like police investigation. Yeah, true.
Sarah said something about looking for an island. What was that?
Where was that then?
A bit further up.
Okay.
Louisa.
Well, the labels are a way to shut people up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you meant
just down a bit. There we go.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Louisa, I'm looking for the island of the misfit toys.
I think we have to. We don't have to. I think the island is a metaphor or a symbol for the society we can create where we are. I mean, what else can we do? I would suggest we can keep looking for it, can't we?
Yeah.
You know, like with a telescope glued to our eye over the horizon. Are we there yet at the island of the misfit toys? No.
I think we need to be ourselves.
We're here and now. We're here and now.
Gaining wisdom. I've heard it put to me this way about rights. A wolf has the right to eat and a chicken has a right to eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true. We know who tends to win that one.
Yeah.
Don't we? In the circle of life.
Barry, you know, seeing as I was talking about your friend from the army that was going down, you know, a change of gender. How did that all work out for him? Her? Because that was like 25 years ago now, wasn't
you'll
it?
get cancelled.
It was a long time ago. I'm just wondering how that worked out. Fear and ignorance breed control issues. Is it epidemic, or have I been watching too many true crime docs?
It is. I mean, so, you know, this idea of hell in the handcart. I think hell is where we're at, and it's getting worse. Hell is this condition, all the conditions you described, that I really don't want to be a part of, and I choose not to be. But all the stuff that goes on in the mind is the hell.
Yeah.
And that's where depression and anxiety and separation and isolation exist. And the handcart is the way we've been taught to and encouraged to think, as in that's the problem. Everyone's thinking about everything rather than, what is it? The Rocky Horror Show, you know, don't what is it? Don't dream it, be it. You know, thinking is dreaming, isn't it? We spend so much time in our heads and so much time trying to create the future, that what's here and now has been put into the shadows. It doesn't. It now almost doesn't exist because we're constantly fixed on the future or being debated with, told how to think, telling other people how to think, and that to me is hell.
Yeah.
Where all of this stuff is going, it is hell and the handcart, and we don't need to go to hell or be taken there. Most people are capable of putting themselves there the first thing in the morning when they get up with their thought processes, and they're not to be blamed for that, because that is the dominant MO of society, isn't it? No wonder people get into these habits, because it's everywhere.
Yes, I really like this. When we hurt our body, it's known as pain. When our heart is broken, our soul suffers pain. Yeah. It's interesting, actually, Paul, because one of the things about this article I mentioned from Charles Eisenstein, the robot who wanted to be a man, the one of the defining factors was remembering that we are ensouled. You know, I think it's very. We're living in times where we're almost forgetting the spiritual aspect of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I would have more to say on our representation of the heart and the soul in this situation, but I think we're out of time, aren't we now?
Yeah, and my cousin's friend dropped off the radar. They went through a bit of a loss.
Painful.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
They were in the army, and they might have actually literally dropped off the radar machine.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, life is all about transformation, and Pluto is the planet of transformation.
And you say this is the shape of things to come for possibly the next 20 years. That influence will be around for 20 years. I
think humanity is exploring the idea of the collective we, and we're going to be. And it's less about like when Pluto went into Leo, which is the opposite sign of Aquarius, it was about me-ism and self-ism. That was the generation that birthed the baby boomers. No offense to any boomers that might be watching.
Why not? Get offended, baby boomers. If ain't one thing, it's another, right?
But it was a time of like rebuilding in the image of us and celebrity and the start of media and Hollywood and showbiz and all sorts of things. And then that generation gained masses in the 80s and amassed lots of wealth in a way that no other generation has ever managed to do since.
Because they're lazy.
No, because
that's what the boomers say.
Yeah, because we're lazy. Yeah. But I mean, like their Pluto generation in Leo is all about them and what they've achieved. And so we're going into the generation of the Pluto in Aquarius, which is about looking at humanity from the perspective of all of us. And like the thing that's really coming up in the media right now is like the WEF idea of having nothing but all being really happy, and all of us going into a world government. And at some level it's like, tra-la-la, that's a great idea, 15-minute cities, wonderful, we're going to save the world, we're going to save the climate because we're all going to be reducing down. I always think to myself, when these things are announced, let's see what happens first. Like, are they going to be putting in extra creches and parks for children and things like that?
First.
No, the cameras go in. So, what's the real intention behind the 15-minute cities? Is it an open prison where everyone's spied on and impoverished? Because all of these things make the people who are making the decisions much wealthier and much more powerful.
Coming to a city near you, and if you're up for it, go for it, is what I say.
Yeah. I mean, it's all a social experiment, and like over the next 20 years, we are experimenting with the idea.
Don't expect me to visit.
We're experimenting with the idea of this collective karma, and for those that don't adopt it or try to stay out of it, we're going to be like Mad Max, experiencing.
Do you think so? I see. I don't know.
I don't know. We're going to find out.
That's what we've been told is going to happen.
Well, we'll find out.
We will.
Time capsule video.
And we have an influence on this. Okay, it's not a given, and it is a lot of what we're told is going to happen is all part of a narrative we don't subscribe to. So let's not be too hasty about accepting the likelihood based on a certain kind of ideology. To conclude, then, is it fair to say this Plutonic plutonium time of 20 years or thereabouts is basically the invitation or the suggestion to folk listening is that we're in a quicksand, and you heard what Mrs. M said before. When you're in a quicksand, you can either panic and sink.
You can fight against it, and like the more you fight, the more you get stuck,
the more you sink. Or you can say, I'm in quicksand. I remember reading that Bear Grylls book, or seeing that YouTube video.
Yeah.
What I need to do is to have presence of mind and float my way out of this. Is that a useful? Is that a useful insight?
That's
and
the
a good
only
moment
thing.
To end
on? That's the only thing we've got control over is ourselves
and our response in the moment to what's happening.
And that's the last thing, which like pulls back into Paul's comment and Charles Eisenstein's thing about being ensouled. When you let go of the control.
Sorry, Jolene's message.
If the earthquake happened in 1700s, there, sure hope it's not in the stars for when I get there. I think some of it also depends if Portugal pisses off the UN. Let's see.
That's not helping.
No, it's not.
Colleen,
anyway.
What I would say to you on a practical level is, if you are concerned about earthquakes, don't live in Lisbon or the Algarve and move further inland into central Portugal, where there are still tremors, because the earth is subject to tremors wherever you are in the world, I believe. Some are felt, some are not. And it's a bit like living in California, isn't it? You accept it as a possibility. And there are more or less things. There are things you can do that are more or less safe and mitigating in these circumstances.
Barry, that's a great
Barry,
concept.
no. You can't, can he?
We almost can't opt out. Like the only way we can opt out of this is like through like ceasing to be here.
Yeah.
Like
Canada then is your best bet.
But sorry, Colleen, I've got your email. Thank you so much. I will respond soon. I think where we opt out of the challenge of self-growth, like this, like karmic thing, I think it comes back anyway. I think my last real thought is like, when you give up that control fight, like in quicksand, you have to trust. And like, what is trust? Like you give yourself up to, I don't know, this like sense of knowing, or like it's faith. And in those moments, that's when you feel connected. That's when you remember that you're a biological being. Like, we all have these biological bodies that are all going to die at some point, but we all feel that sense of the eternal in us, and that's our soul or spirit. There's an animating force, the surrender that Suze is talking about.
Amen.
And so that is the absolute beauty of these Pluto things. It brings us to our knees, and it sprinkles fairy dust on us when we surrender.
Thanks, Suze.
Yeah.
For that.
And Colleen, not worried, bring it on, Pluto. Yeah.
I love that. That is, I think. Oh, Tom's here, so hi, Tom.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Colleen, definitely bring it on, Pluto.
And Barry, we can all opt out. I think
this
is a place where
Barry.
we can have choice.
The opt out is the spiritual, isn't it?
I think you're asking. I think you're asking to opt out of like the 15-minute cities. I don't think that's your cup of tea, is it? Sarah's already opted out.
Yeah. She is in the, what was it? The island of the naughty things. No, she didn't say that. Did she? The misfit toys. Misfit toys. Come join the island. Come and join the islanders, Barry, over here. Sarah's leading the way. We like the cut of her jib. Colleen's not worried about it. And Suze is ready to surrender as well in the best possible way. And there's no white flag involved there, I can tell you. Wow. Okay, Mrs. M. Every time I try and finish,
do you know what?
I
just want to say one more thing. What is that
phrase? Shall I go make a cup of tea?
No. What is that phrase that Dr. Dane says about judgment or consciousness?
Accepts everything and judges nothing.
Yeah, consciousness is the place where everything is accepted and nothing is judged. And that just seems like a million miles away from where most of us are. Definitely, like I sit here judging stuff all day long. Because there are some things I fundamentally disagree with. And then I just have to realize that, I don't know, we're all here and we've all got to share this place. And if we're all judging each other, because Sarah, Sarah, you know Dr. Dane, don't you? You've met him a couple of times. Receive everything and judge nothing.
Right.
Love it.
Mrs. M, is that it now?
Yeah, I'm done now.
Really?
Thank you so much,
Going?
everyone. Yeah.
Going?
Let's roll the outro.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, everyone.
everybody.
Have a lovely weekend.
Yeah,
Bon
do.
fin de semana.
Bye for now. Ciao, ciao.